Hi, this is Mr. Evans. This video has been requested. It's a quick look at the economic environment in the UK in 2018 to give you a bit of context for the 2018 exams. So this is what you need to know about the economic environment. And here are some headlines that I've just picked over the last few days, up to a month or so, about what's going on in the UK economy. So on the plus side, a year-long pay squeeze has come to an end. So people's wages are now increasing faster than inflation. That's very important because it means that people in real terms are better off than they were last year, and that wasn't the case in 2017. The interest rate has been held at a record low, but that's because the Bank of England is now no longer confident that the UK will grow throughout the rest of 2018. And in fact, that relates to a very low rate of growth recorded in the first quarter of the year. UK inflation fell to its lowest in a year. That's good. But footfall in stores, in other words, the number of people walking into retailers, is in an unprecedented decline. Now, there are lots of reasons for that, largely online businesses and the emergence of those kind of Westfield, Trafford Centre style shopping centres where people go rather than the high street shop. But these are just some bit of context really about what's been going on in the news in the run up to your exams. So these are the four government objectives for the economy. Economic growth means that the value of goods and services being produced in the UK is going up. Last year we recorded 1.2% growth. It's quite slow. This year, very concerning. In the first 3 months of the year, the UK economy only grew by 0.1%, which is very, very low growth and potentially quite worrying for the UK economy. However, despite the low growth, unemployment is very low, around 4.2%, which is quite unusual in economic terms. Usually you would expect a low growth environment to have quite high unemployment, but that hasn't been the case. Lots of better economists than me are confused about that, but one of the reasons might be more flexible working arrangements, 0-hour contracts that mean that people do have jobs, but maybe they're not employed as much as they want to be, i.e. they're not getting enough hours. That's called underemployment, but not unemployment. So there's quite interesting things going on there. In terms of price stability or inflation, the government have a target that they set for the Bank of England to achieve of 2% inflation a year. That means that if something cost £100 last year, it's going to cost £102 this year. The most recent inflation data that I've got when I'm recording this is that inflation was 2.5% in that was March, I think, 2018, but they're going to release the April figure in the next few days, so that will change very, very shortly. And probably what won't change between now and your exam is the fact that the UK has a huge balance of trade deficit, which means that we import a much greater value of goods and services than we export. That's been the case for a very long time. I believe since about 2000 was the last time we recorded a balance of payments surplus. It could even be earlier than that, actually. Anyway, it's been a long time that we've imported a lot more than we've exported. Related to that, this is showing the pound to euro exchange rate over a few years, and you can see a very dramatic fall in the pound euro exchange rate. This little peak here is Brexit, and you can see before that the value of the pound was falling, but very dramatic fall in the value of the pound over the last few years. Stabilized a little bit recently, but still the pound buys far fewer euros than it used to. We have had a currency depreciation. Well, what should that do? It should make the price of imports rise, making British businesses more competitive against businesses abroad. It should make the price of UK exports fall, meaning that UK businesses can export more. So this effect of the currency depreciation hasn't really come through yet. Yes, we are exporting a little bit more than we used to, but it tends to take a little bit of time for consumers and businesses abroad to realise that British businesses are a lot more competitive than they used to be. In addition to that, the impact of the falling pound has meant that the cost of imported materials rose very dramatically. So if you're a business that relied on imports, then the cost of your imports went up quite dramatically. And that led to some inflation in the UK economy, peaking at around 3.1%, I think, in November of 2017. But yeah, the fact that we import a lot of stuff that actually, it's all very well saying, okay, well, British businesses are becoming more competitive. If I'm a British business, maybe I'll look for a British supplier rather than importing stuff because it's more expensive. Well, a lot of stuff we can't produce ourselves. If you rely on bananas, for example, and the currency depreciates, you've got to pay for more expensive bananas because there's no alternative here. So we import a lot of food. More importantly, well, not necessarily more importantly, we also import a lot of fuel as well. So the cost of oil and things like that has also gone up. So potentially there are opportunities for UK businesses to sell more overseas, but it hasn't really happened yet. And in terms of fiscal policy, which is UK government spending and taxation, the UK has been running a budget deficit for a very long time, certainly since the early 2000s, which is where the government spends more money than it takes in tax. Now, this is a problem. Just like if you spend more money than you get in, you need to borrow the difference. And that's what the UK government has been doing for a very long time. And we've accumulated a huge national debt. Now, the Conservative government, when they came to power in 2010, saw the size of the national debt and the budget deficit and set about cutting government spending in order that they could reduce the size of the budget deficit. Now, that happened far slower than they thought it would, and we still are running a budget deficit this year. The new Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, still wants to reduce the size of the budget deficit and, in fact, reduce it entirely, eliminate the budget deficit by 2025, and the way of doing that is to cut government spending rather than increase taxation. But that means that that's created problems for UK businesses. Public sector workers, government workers haven't had pay rises for a very long time. There's been some easing of that, I believe, for nurses and maybe police officers this year, but certainly a lot of public sector employees haven't received pay rises, so that's bad for businesses. Also, if you're a business that relies on the government as a customer, maybe you're an infrastructure builder or you deliver some sort of healthcare, maybe you're a cleaner in a hospital, a private contractor cleaner, well, you won't have probably received too much of extra money in recent years because government have cut the spending. So in terms of interest rates, well, what's going on? In terms of interest rates, the interest rate at the moment in the UK is a record low at 0.5%. That's extremely low. They were cut following the global financial crisis in order to stimulate the UK economy. However, they can't be kept low. And, economic analysts are convinced, 100% convinced, that there will be an interest rate rise this year. They were actually convinced it was going to take place in May, but it didn't for various reasons, which I'll go into in a moment. So the interest rate is expected to increase. What's that going to do to the UK economy? Well, the cost of borrowing will go up. People will get more in debt if they borrow money, so people are disincentivized for doing that. But if you save your money in the bank, the higher interest rate means you're more rewarded for doing so. So what does that do to consumption? Well, people are disincentivized from borrowing money, consumption falls, and the impact on economic growth and UK businesses could be quite detrimental. So as we saw in the little headline at the beginning, the bank actually held rates at 0.5% in May when they were fully expected to put it up and for this to happen. Why didn't they put up rates? Because economic growth in the UK was so poor in the first quarter that they felt that they couldn't. But that's probably just delaying the inevitable, which is likely to happen later this year. So, final one is on open trade, free trade, and protectionism. Now, there's a lot going on at the moment about this stuff. Partly because of Brexit, the UK has open free trade with the European Union at the moment, who are our biggest export market and also who we import the most from. And basically, no one knows what's going to happen in terms of trade with the EU. That could have a detrimental impact on British companies that sell to the EU or British companies that import goods from the EU. It could make it more difficult to do business, more expensive to do business, which probably wouldn't be good. Also, protectionism is in the news at the moment a lot. Donald Trump has threatened to protect US industry. In fact, he has put tariffs on US steel. But it looks like maybe the protectionism that he suggested may occur won't be as bad as once thought, but it's very difficult to tell what Donald Trump is going to do about anything. But protectionism could be extremely damaging for UK businesses. It would make them more difficult to sell overseas, etc. Really important on those two things, Brexit and Trump. If you want to have a really in-depth knowledge of what's going on, you need to keep up with the news yourself, because it's constantly changing with these things. Anyway, they create opportunities and threats for UK businesses. In summary, how's the UK economy doing? Well, not terribly well. Growth isn't great. Wages are increasing in real terms very slowly. And the depreciation of sterling hasn't had the positive impact on UK exports that we thought it would. However, if the UK economy can take advantage of the opportunities presented by Brexit, we may be able to export more overseas, and shouldn't be too down on the UK economy. Wages are rising, albeit slowly.